Hey, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. On this episode, we're checking out the sequel to one of Konami's lesser talked about yet awesome horizontal shooter series. Today we're looking at Thundercross 2, releasing exclusively to the Japanese arcade in 1991. This was made available on the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 in April of 2021 via the arcade archives. We'll be looking at the Switch version in today's video. As mentioned in the first review, a few ideas from the original game carry over, while also making some notable improvements from its predecessor. Before we get into all that, let's check out the mission brief. 3 years after defeating the Black Impulse, they've returned to once again attempt to conquer the solar system. They're back with a new and even more versatile arsenal and even larger crafts than last time. Luckily for us, the Thundercross fighters were getting upgrades of their own. Now with more munitions and enemies on the field, it's time to find the core of the Black Impulse and destroy it once and for all. Gameplay wise, you've got 7 more levels of horizontal shoot 'em up goodness, and it plays by the same rules as the Japanese release of Thundercross 1. By that I mean you can stack up to 4 options which you can expand and contract around your craft, along with the same weapon upgrade system with a few extra weapons this time around as you flatten the Black Impulse once again. Thundercross 2 does also have a few gameplay improvements with its faster speeds and reworked control of its predecessor. The ability to use power weapons is also back from the original Japanese release, and you can bang heads like heavy metal on most occasions, so long as you stay powered up. Thundercross 2 also has multiple paths, either taking a cave route or a cyber cave route, which are randomized on each run, and the enemies are also switched up quite a bit here compared to the original. Gameplay here is also noticeably more balanced, and the enemies and boss characters all pack as much power as you do. While some bosses in the original Thundercross might have seemed slightly more simple, the ones seen here in the sequel will clap you until you figure out their dance moves. Since the sequel falls closer to the Japanese version, nearly everything from the US release was cut out, including the little baby bombs, but in its place you get all the new weapon upgrades from the Japanese release along with a few new devastating options. Thundercross 2 also allows you to continue right where you left off, including on the final boss encounter. So with the exception of no formal crush bombs, it's only got a few things that didn't make it over from the sequel that were in the US release. This makes a bit more sense considering that Thundercross 2 never made it to stateside arcades, so the lack of those features does check out. Graphics wise, Thundercross 2 released around some of Konami's biggest licensed titles and was programmed with similar hardware of that era, running on the same hardware the likes of TMNT, The Simpsons, and Sunset Riders, to name a few. The graphics here are a step up from the original, which already had some solid sprite work, and this entry adds in even more unique characters and environments in its 7-stage foray. There's a fairly wide variety of enemies between each stage and some really crisp detail on all the sprites. You even see a few types similar to those seen in the Gradius series. Environments are all fairly interesting too, with its opening stage having some superb layering on the playfields with its gold hour day to dusk transition leading into the first boss encounter. The animations of the backgrounds are all mainly killer here too as well, with the caves and space stations being standouts with their visual detail. The asteroid belt trope is done really well here with massive lasers cutting through the frame, bending around the rocks, and this also looks pretty sick. Boss characters are also a bit more imaginative here with some anthropomorphic baddies thrown in, along with some massive ships that feel like something out of Gun Frontier. There's a good mix of characters seen throughout, one of which interestingly enough is also called Dinosaur Jr. If it's a reference to the band of the same name, that would be a really funny coincidence. Weapons and fire patterns also got some nice animations, especially the power weapons this time around. With each weapon upgrade, the fire pattern gets more pronounced, and when maxed out, you can nearly fill the screen with bullets. The action stage ratcheted up while staying visually intense. Sound-wise, Thundercross 2 ups the ante and doubles down on a banging soundtrack as you plow through the Black Impulse, and there are some certified heaters in here. Metal Yuki drops track after track, keeping the vibe hype on your interstellar battle, along with handling the sound design on this outing. While the music in the original was pretty good, the tunes here are very good. Sound effects work here is also on point and has some nice crunchy sound effects. Gunfire and explosions sound nice and full here, and even has a few Gradius sound bites here thrown in for good measure. The power weapons also sound quite devastating here, as well as each shot having some serious base to it with its power and special weapons. The flamethrower and grenade launcher particularly slap heavy here with the audio. Much like last time, Thundercross 2 takes an already solid foundation and builds upon it in many ways, making this a fairly solid sequel, audibly especially. The audio in general just bangs from end to end and will likely be a standout for most players. This was from a time when Konami seemed to be nearly unstoppable as a developer and publisher with titles like this as their second and third string releases. They had an astonishing pedigree throughout the late 80s and early 90s. In closing, Thundercross 2 is awesome, to put it plainly, and compared to the original, makes several improvements to an already solid title. The action is just as fierce as the tunes that carry the action along with it, and it will certainly challenge players wanting to go for clears and 1cc's, which is honestly fun to try from time to time. It's really interesting this series doesn't get mentioned a little bit more than it does, and seeing the arcade units may be tough, in the States especially, but if you see a Thundercross 1 or 2 machine, give it a try, otherwise it's available on the Switch for just a couple bucks. Thundercross 2 gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes recommended to horizontal shoot 'em up fans as well as arcade game fans in general, since this is a really fun one to blast through. Once you learn everything your ship can do and feel the improvements from the original, it's low-key one of Konami's best shooters. This one does have a challenge to it, so getting to the final encounter is going to take a little bit of practice, but you've got more than enough on your side to make that journey happen. Though it is strange strange that neither games got a home port, but their console division did have some great original shooters in the works, one of which we'll talk about real soon. And thanks again if you made it this far into the video. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use this as a resource. Check back often, we'll have more reviews and commentaries coming up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.